the question is, how did the Legacy series come about? And so I think I mentioned it before that I had a dream about one moment in the book Morning Glory, which is the second book in the series. And from that dream, I was so intrigued by it because I don't know, maybe you dream this way, but I had never really dreamt that way. I dreamt as if I was watching a scene from back in time in the 1800s and wagons and people in big dresses and men in nice suits and in regular work clothes and what have you. And so I dreamt a scene that actually takes place in Galveston, Texas in that book. And when I woke up and I began to talk it out and write it out in my journal and I shared it with my husband, I was like, I think this is a book. And I sat down and within 10 days or 2 weeks, I wrote Morning Glory. Now, it looked nothing like it does today because there's been a lot of editing and changing over the years with it and just lots of work into it. But from there, that's what started. And then as I did Morning Glory, I could see that I could just feel it, that I needed to write the story of Michael Brennan, which is from the book Forgiven, which is the first book. And when I finished those two books and they happen parallel in time, because Cassandra Brennan and Michael Brennan are brother and sister. So when I decided to release those books, when I first published them, um, I knew that Forgiven needed to be first because after that, I had already seen the books that would come later. I knew that I would write about Bran. I knew that I would write about Katya and Callie. And at that time, I don't think I knew I was going to write a book about Mary Alyssa. But as I got deeper into the books and she developed as a character, I very much knew I wanted to write about Mary Alyssa and I could see her life unfold. And so I wanted to include that in the canon of those books of that series. And so that's kind of how that happened. And really, to be honest, I fall in love with my characters and I could see such life and activity. Like I could almost see a parallel story going on with Katya to Bran to Callie. And it was like I was like, oh, I want to know what those stories are. So I would sit down and write a book and develop and find their story and share it with you. And then I would sit down with the other character and go, oh my gosh, I want to know what their story is. And in so doing, I didn't want to make the other children insignificant, but I could tell their stories could be partly told within those main stories. So that's how I chose to do it. There is a book in the middle of well, not quite in the middle, but it's before, I think it's before The Chosen or after The Chosen. Anyway, and it's called A Heart of Hope. And it is the only modern day book in that series. Now, I did pull it out of the series at this moment because it doesn't affect the storyline by any means because it's basically a modern version of characters that look back and learn more about the characters in the past, maybe characters in the family that didn't exist when I wrote the original books. And so it's a special book. It's also the book, and I'll be honest, that I tell some of my story in through some of the characters. Now, I think any writer will tell you that they're in every character in some form. Well, not maybe every character. I mean, I've written some really evil characters. I hope I'm not in there. But I definitely, there are parts of me in lots of characters. And that makes sense. They say, write what you know. Well, you know yourself. You know your experiences. You know your life lessons. You know your pains, your heartaches, your joys, your compassion, all those things that you know about yourself. You want to put those into people because it makes the character so much more believable. Also, in my characters, if you know my family at all, you'll see my husband all the time in lots of characters. You'll see my son Jerry and my son Seth. I write about them. I include them in my character canon, in some of their character traits and their qualities and things that they might think or say. And I think that's what helps make characters round and alive and real if they're at least have some breath in them from people's actual lives. And so that's kind of how the legacy books came about. The last book will be For the Love of a Scot, and it actually starts the whole beginning. And so I always like to think that you could start with Forgiven or The Love of a Scot and read the whole thing. So you could start with Forgiven and read all the way to The Love of a Scot, or you could probably start with The Love of a Scot and read all the way to Forgiven. So anyway, I like the circle concept. But that's it. That's how it all kind of came about.